Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Added Time, our weekly FPL football podcast. We've got a cool topic for you this week that Mike's going to talk about. We're going to debate about it. This is our preseason podcast in the lead up to the 2024-2025 Premier League season. So, Mike, why don't you tell us what you've got cooking?
Well, we're going to look today at the top 5 teams to target for the first 5 fixtures of the season. And while you're hitting that target, what should you avoid? The bottom 5 teams. In other words, the 5 teams with the worst fixtures that you should try and stay clear of, according to FDR. But what do we always say on this channel?
That form matters.
So we might have some time in the next episode to talk about preseason and see where the form is as well. And 5 is important, Nate. Why is 5 important if FPL this season?
Because 5 is the number of transfers we get. That's the number of free transfers. So 5 is a holy number this season in FPL, I think.
Because looking at 5 fixtures now is a very important point, because now 5 fixtures means a wild card, a mini wild card that you can use to rebalance your entire team. So for right now, it has never been more important to look at those 5 fixtures ahead and look at the team. So let's jump to those teams straight up. And the first team that is looking tasty, what's that team? That team is a team that I didn't think that I would go into the season looking at. It's Fulham. Chelsea is supposed to have a thing against.
Yeah, based on FDR, Fulham's got 3 green fixtures and 2 grey neutral ones. United being one of the grey ones. Just saying. We've got
3 home fixtures.
Yes, and 3 home fixtures, which is also quite good. For those of you that are watching on YouTube, there's going to be a graphic on the screen so you can follow along with us. Mike's put it together. As you can see, we've got Fulham up there with their fixtures coming up. They got United, Leicester at home, Ipswich away, newly promoted Ipswich. Tasty treat. They got West Ham at home, and then they end that 5th week with Newcastle at home, which will be quite a challenge.
So that's 2 promoted teams in the first 5 game weeks, 3 home fixtures. And the only tricky one I see there is that Man United away on the first day. And I'm willing to take a little bit of a hit, because we'll talk about United maybe a little later, but United is the one team in FPL that I always say the same thing over the last couple of years. You don't know what you're going to get. I don't know if Bruno's popping off or Maguire's scoring an own goal. We just don't know. So, and it's always been like that with United. And I'm not saying they're a bad team. They just, some teams you know are going to be bad, but United you don't know. So Fulham is the best. Now, Nate, which player would you choose from Fulham if you could only choose one?
So there is 3 that come to mind, but I'll just say the 3 and then I'll tell you which one of the 3 I recommend, because we got to look at the cheap 4.5 mil and Robinson being in the back. He's an enabler for the team. He gets forward. He does a lot of running. He's got good crossing into the box. He's got good setup play. So he's definitely someone to look out for. Then you can't talk about Fulham if you don't talk about Andreas. Andreas last season was crazy for points. Nice low budget player as well. And then up front, you got Muniz, the man that is on most people's radar for a budget midfield option. So from those 3, I would look at targeting Muniz. Just based off the majority of home games, Fulham can score goals. So I would think I'd look at Muniz.
He had such a good season last season. Not like FPL breaking, but the type of season that I think sets you up to go beyond that. So who is on penalties? That's what we have to take a look at. Let's look at preseason fixtures to figure out who is on the penalty duty. Because if it's Andreas, I might be swaying to playing that 5 midfield and Andreas in instead of Muniz. But if Muniz is on penalties, that is a tasty opportunity. Now, Liverpool, on the other hand, they have, again, 3 home fixtures. Their fixtures are, aside from that 1 away game at Man United, which could really go anyway, normally goes towards Man United, those Man United home games for Liverpool. But those 4 fixtures are all big wins for Liverpool.
They should be winning all of those fixtures. Ipswich away, tough game, but again, newly promoted side. They got Brentford at home, they got Forest at home, and they got Bournemouth at home. So in reality, they should be winning all of those games. Like you say, United's the only tough one. For the player, for me, everyone's going to say Salah, obviously, but I would just think I have a second option just because we all know Salah is going to be the one to pick for the season. But my second option would be Trent. I think that having Trent up in your defense, maybe if you're looking for a premium defender slot, I know he's a bit expensive, but he's cheaper than last season. coming in at 7 mil. I think Trent could be a good player, considering where he's playing now. Reece James plays for that position for Chelsea now. It doesn't really work out for James, but Trent's not James, and Trent's a bit different in how he plays. So I think he could be a good midfield asset as a defender coming into the season, getting defensive points for playing in the midfield position. So
It all depends on what Slot's going to do. A new manager comes in.
Exactly.
Is he going back to the traditional back
Slot,
four?
I see what you did there.
He's going to slot Trent back in, not slot. He's going to slot Trent back in at that right back position. And we see, because personally for me, the drop in points was because Trent in midfield was not a good asset compared to Trent as defender or fullback. He ran forward less. He was more or less involved in goals. He did more of a defensive duty. He controlled the game. But if he goes back to that traditional right back, right wing back, full back, flying out there, TAA.
I definitely see him pushing up into the midfield and playing like an inverted back, but still wide, just to keep giving this Liverpool that space. But like we say, we have to just see and wait what Liverpool lines up. But I think Trent would be one to watch other than Salah, because I think you should just have Salah.
Yeah, Trent 7 mil still a lot. Then we move on to the next team, and I think this is probably the most consistent pick, the player that you are going to mention in a bit. But Newcastle have, again, 3 home games, one tricky one against Spurs. Spurs. And both Southampton and Bournemouth. Those seem on paper to be easy fixtures. Newcastle recovering from a less than successful season compared to the season before. And I think that there's some goals there. Now tell us about the player that most people have seen in their drafts. What is his name?
He's Swedish, and it's not Zlatan. It's Isak. So Isak coming in at 8.5 mil. Obviously very hot. I think he's about 50% owned. I could be wrong, but he's up there. He's definitely up there. With that home fixture to kick off his Premier League season against Southampton, it could be a great season for him. He did show some signs last season, so I hope for him and for FPL that he can pop off and have a great season. You obviously got to mention, if you're talking about Newcastle, you have to touch on Billy Gordon. Gordon for Newcastle also had phenomenal season last season and really helped fill that number 9 position for goals when there was the issues with Wilson and Isak for injuries. So definitely one of those two. I have to throw it out there because I loved him and I used him last season all the time, and he's still 4.5 mil. Is Dan Burn. What an asset. So definitely another player to consider. Like I say, the Newcastle, Liverpool, Fulham players, there's a lot of players to look at because of there's such good fixtures coming up. But I think Isak number 1. And if you want to make space for other Newcastle players, Gordon, Dan Burn, I think.
There's some other interesting things going on, because if Trippier leaves, it means Livramento takes that position at left back,
and he's very cheap,
solidifies his own. And we don't really know exactly where Burn is going to play. If he sometimes plays left back, or is he going to take a centre back, or others going to be ahead of him?
I just read that Eddie Howe really likes Dan Burn, so we'll have to see. Like you say, we'll have to see where he fits, and if he starts, I think he's going to be a regular.
What about the guy from The Lion King? Fabian Schär. He also is a player to keep an eye on as well, I think, for attacking returns.
Yeah, for sure.
Next team, tell me about Crystal Palace's fixtures.
Crystal Palace, I think there's only one man that really highlights it, and I think everyone knows what I'm about to say, and it's easy as Eze. It's just the way it is. You could look at Mateta, but I think Eze is just class. And with Elise, not really. I think there's some transfer stuff happening with him. I don't really think he's staying at the club. I think Eze is the one that you got to look at for going forward for Palace assets.
Yeah, and I have another player on my watch list, and that's Anderson.
Oh, Anderson. Yep. I had him last season as well. He skyrocketed in price. He also had some good returns. And Crystal Palace is just that team that can keep a clean sheet when you never expect it. So I can see some points come from them.
And I would say if Chelsea starts the season badly, which is likely to happen, those first 4 fixtures can end up being a good run for Crystal Palace. Like by the time they get to Man United, they could have won all 4 of those games.
Yeah.
Brentford, West Ham, Chelsea, and then you beat Leicester. And all of a sudden you're rocking up at, it's at Crystal Palace, and you rock up and Man United comes to visit you, and you sitting top of the table with 12 points. That game becomes even more tasty. I also
want to say Leicester City's actually going to be an easy target this season. There's something to keep out for because they don't have the manager that brought them through the championship. So they're also going to change their style of football. And to be fair, based off Chelsea's preseason, I wouldn't be worried if their manager stayed at Leicester this season. I think it still would have been a tasty treat. That's just a bit of side Chelsea rant because I had to get it out of my system. It wouldn't be a FPL podcast, Added Time FPL podcast without a bit of Chelsea. But Mike, why don't you tell us? We've got Man United coming up. I know there's one player that we're all going to be looking at. I don't even need you to look at the notes that I made about this player. I'm pretty sure you have this player in mind. But he's the center of the United attacking and I would say midfield defense sometimes. Probably going to be on pens. Couldn't win the Euros with Portugal, but came close. And it's Bruno Fernandes, isn't it?
Yeah, I've seen memes all week because I don't know why they're making fun of him because of diving in the Olympics. But that's so many memes, and I don't understand right now why it's coming out. But yeah, sure. This is something I want to talk about because I don't see him in many teams. Why? Well, it's because we don't know what to expect with Man United, but they're up there with the fixtures. They've got, if their Fulham fixture goes their way and Brighton, Southampton and Crystal Palace, they've just got that Liverpool one. United with keeping their manager. They've made one defensive signing. They could still make another signing up front. Mount stays fit. He does well. Rashford comes back to form that we are used to. And we have Holland, the Temu version of Haaland. Is on the score sheet.
And to be fair to United, they can beat Liverpool. It's just what United shows up on the day.
Remember, this is a team that actually ended the season with a trophy, okay? Not many teams can say that.
Yeah.
They did it, and they kept their manager. I put them way above Chelsea in terms of where they can.
I agree. They can definitely do top 4 this season if they. I think if they don't do top 4, I think Ten Hag goes. But we'll talk about that as the season unfolds. But definitely a team to look out for.